Alrighty, so we have Caro-kann here against Pawn Storm 96. Probably going to Pawn Storm us. Here he goes. So yeah, just going to put the bishop on f5, and he goes for knight f3. So let's see what he does. And okay, so what he's going for here is the so-called short variation, named after Nigel Short, I believe, where basically white, they avoid trading the light squared bishops off of bishop d3, which would sort of be strategically favorable for us, and they just try to continue with development. And in the long run, what they want is to really use this base advantage to just squeeze the living hell out of black. And there are a few different ways that you can try to go about this. One is to sort of try and play c5 and get, like, you know, our typical break-in for this sort of structure, try to get like sort of an improved version of the French. But because we're sort of a bit behind in development, trying to open the game up so early can be a little bit risky, and you really need to know your theory quite well to make sure you don't get completely run over. I kind of prefer the other type of approach though, which is you sort of play a bit more slowly, and then later on you might try to go for a pawn break like c5 or f6, but only after you've really brought in some other pieces. So I'm going to play knight to e7. It's an interesting move. I presume they're going to castle. There's also some other moves they can play though, like c3 or knight bd2, which are also completely fine. But yeah, okay, so a few different things we can do. Knight d7, h6, c5 is even a thing that looks like a bit strange because we've blocked our bishop from taking, but the idea is after this we bring this knight to c6 and then the other one to d7. We sort of try to pick up their pawns. I'm going to play this move though, knight to g6, which is a little bit strange looking, but is quite interesting. A lot of white players don't really know what to do against this because, like, yeah, I mean, it's a rare move and it's not very common, the Caro-kann, that the knight, or this French structure in general. Oh, I guess in some French defenses the knight does come here, but yeah, in general, it's especially with the bishop on f5 a bit awkward in terms of the coordination. But the idea is with putting the knight on g6 is that we're very directly putting pressure on the e5 pawn, and instead of aiming for the c5 break, we're going to aim for this one with f6. But okay, our opponent may have seen this before. They're playing somewhat quickly here, but yeah, we're pressuring this. Very likely they're going to take. That's the most sort of normal reaction, but it's also possible for white to try and just open as many lines up in the position, play c4, allow black to win a pawn, but then try to like sort of gain a lead in development. I don't really get the feeling our opponent's going to play this though. They're thinking though, they haven't automatically taken, which is a potential sign they might be trying to think of some sort of way to sacrifice e5 and open some lines up, but the majority of players I've faced just simply take, and that's what our opponent does. Okay, I should pause for a moment. There's a few different ways we can recapture. But queen takes is by far the best one, or maybe there's some other ones that are playable. Maybe pawn takes is a thing, but I've never looked at that specifically. But yeah, so the reason we play queen takes, not say knight takes, is that we want to control the e5 square and eventually maybe get in the e5 break. Obviously, if you put your knight there, you sort of loosen that grip over the square. Maybe a knight can come in some other squares, but yeah, we play queen takes really just to reinforce our control over this. Okay, bishop d6, just keep developing. And yeah, c4 is important, and this sort of, you know, creates some direct pressure on our center, but it also somewhat disincentivizes us from going e5 in the future, with the kind of premise being that now they can take, and at the end of all those exchanges, we're going to have this isolated d5 pawn, which arguably would be a bit of a weakness. But okay, yeah, so far I'm pretty happy with how things are looking. Our pieces are very active. If possible, we'd like to chuck a knight into f4, so sometimes we see a move like pawn to g3, but that has some other issues then, because like that just weakens some of the light squares around the king side. But yeah, all in all, pretty content so far, I think, with how the opening is going. See queen to b3, and yeah, queen to b3, I think usually rook b8 is sort of the way to defend this. I don't think I really want to sacrifice that pawn. Like, of course, when they make a move like queen b3, you know, a lot of players immediately jump to how can I defend the pawn, but it's also important to ask yourself, can I just ignore that? Because if you can ignore it, that's often the most powerful response to a move like queen b3, because then they would have just wasted the whole tempo. But yeah, I don't really think we want to allow this, because then our whole pawn structure would fall apart. I don't think we can do anything that would cause significant enough damage in the short term to really justify that. So I'm just going to play rook to b8. I could also play b6, but then I feel like that weakens c6 quite significantly. So I feel like rook b8 is the best way to defend the b7 pawn, as it's the least committal one in terms of weakening other things in the position. So yeah, rook b8 I think makes quite a bit of sense. And yeah, from here, castles, knight f4 if possible. Maybe h6 at some point is also quite a decent move, just sort of taking away the g5 square from some of white's pieces. Maybe they're gonna like chuck a bishop there at some point, but I don't really think that's too scary at this point, because we just go back and then we can kick them anyway. But sometimes there's ideas like let's say bishop g5 and then going for knight to h4, with the point being that maybe we exchange and then they can bring the bishop around back on this diagonal and try and exchange off sort of our good bishop. And just from a strategic point of view, if they manage to exchange off this bishop, then there's a lot of weak dark squares in our position, especially the e5 square. Like if they could get a knight there, that would be quite annoying, assuming that we wouldn't be able to oppose it. So yeah, those are just some things that we need to be thinking about. It's also quite possible though that maybe after this, let's say knight h4, that we can also just ignore this and not take it, and we can also maybe just play h6, with the point being that like if they will move the bishop back, then they lose the knight. Let's say they take on f5, e takes f5, then their bishop is actually, I think, trapped, because if it goes back to e3, we'd get f4. But they could also maybe play knight g6. But okay, they end up playing g3, which, yeah, we were mentioning earlier, definitely makes some sense. It restricts our knight on g6, but it has some other issues in that it does weaken some light squares. So castles is what I would just consider doing. There's also h6, but yeah, I don't see any real issues with castles, so I think that's just what I'm going to do. And yeah, it's quite difficult for both sides at the moment, because there's not really like a clear pawn break that either side can really go for. e5 significantly weakens this and potentially might just drop it, because now the queen's attacking this as well. But on the flip side, white also is struggling to really find a clear plan, like a clear pawn break, that is, because like what do, right? If they push this, doesn't really lead anywhere in particular. If they take, then that might just improve our pawn structure. So yeah, it's a bit difficult for both sides at the moment, but personally I think I'd still prefer black. It feels like we have a few ways that we can still continue improving our position, where I'm not necessarily sure the same thing can be said for black, but okay. Rook to e1, logical enough move, and yeah, I'm considering just h6 and just sort of improving the position quite slowly. There's no rush to go for anything too drastic quite yet, just take away some squares for their pieces. It's worth noting h5 is also somewhat tempting, but then I'm concerned that bishop g5 and then like they start controlling a lot of dark squares. So yeah, I'd rather just park the pawn on h6, and maybe there are some maneuvers that we can start thinking about. Like one that I've seen before, I think, is like maybe knight e7, tuck the bishop back and then put the knight onto f5. Because yeah, if you think about in terms of like our worst placed piece, definitely one of our worst placed pieces right now is definitely the knight on g6, as it's completely being manhandled by this pawn on g3. But nonetheless, we see c5, which to me strikes me as completely wrong, because now they release all the tension on this pawn, and unless they have a concrete idea, which is maybe like to tuck the queen away and then go b4, b5, but even that I'm not particularly convinced by. It just seems like a completely just horrible strategic move, because now it's way easier for us to accomplish e5. We do have to watch out for the queen potentially causing any issues on this diagonal from a tactical standpoint, but I don't quite see how that can happen. And okay, it looks like they're going full-on defensive mode. I don't think this can be too good for them. Bishop a5 is an interesting idea, maybe just trying to tie the knight down, but I don't really think that's completely necessary. I think we can just focus on going full steam ahead with e5. We can also try to better prepare that, but honestly, like, okay, we could go bishop g4, we could go like, I mean, for the other thing we were talking about earlier, knight e7, move the bishop, then knight f5. That's also quite possible, but I don't know. It feels very tempting to go for just e5 immediately, and yeah, I think I'm just gonna go for that. I can't see a clear issue with it, so it makes sense to kind of just play it. And yeah, I think this is quite common even at this level. I mean, okay, our opponent's clearly not like a patzer, but even then, okay, so they've taken, yeah, even then still you can see that. So do we take this way or this way? Let's just take this way, solve the issue of this knight. But yeah, even then you can see the moment there's a little bit of tension and there's no clear plan, they immediately just try to latch on to something where at least they get some semblance of clarity. But unfortunately, the clarity they bring about into the position is not of a very good nature, because gives us a clear plan, but unfortunately still I mean, I guess they at least sort of get an open file now, and maybe they can like put a bishop onto d4 and say their pieces look pretty, but unfortunately I don't think pretty looking pieces are good enough to win a chess game. So yeah, so we do see bishop d4. I'm considering bishop to g4 at this point. Looks quite tempting. Obviously they've sort of got us in this pin, but I don't really see where that's going to lead. One thing we need to watch out for is not to blunder like our bishop. Well, actually, is that a blunder? Like, because if they simply take that, then we get knight takes f3 check, and then we can maybe take on d4. So that's actually not so simple, and they also get the attack blocked off on this piece. So let's say they are, but if they just take that first, then maybe that could be slightly annoying. Okay, so bishop g4 was the first thing I was looking at. It's also quite logical. And one thing I quite like is bishop takes e5. And then if they take, then we can maybe take on f2 check first, king here, queen takes d2, and then like we're a pawn up at the moment. Our rook is hanging, but if they take that, we have bishop to f3 check. And oh, do they have just king g1? Wow, okay. They might have that. No, but surely that doesn't really work. So bishop g4 takes. I mean, at the very least, we can just take back. And like, I'm pretty sure we're better, and it's not that easy for them to defend this. So I'm just going to go for this on the basis that like we have multiple good options there, and this is a rapid game. We can't afford to spend like the next few minutes really calculating, because we're sort of getting somewhat low on time. But yeah, it doesn't feel super easy for them to defend. If they just try to defend the knight, of course, well, that doesn't work, because we just go take with check, and then we win a piece at the end of that. So yeah, it doesn't really work. So they kind of have to take, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I maybe rook e3, I was thinking. No, but then I just take with the bishop first and then take there. So yeah, they have to play knight takes e5, and then probably bishop takes e5 makes a lot of sense, takes. And well, after takes here, we could also take on e5 first, I guess, and then we can take on d2. And in that case, we are just a clear pawn up. So yeah, not really a whole lot of good things I can say about White's position. And it really feels like everything is just coming together full circle. All of our pieces just being on very harmonious squares, all pointed towards the black king basically. And White sort of wasted too much time like moving their bishop back, playing g3, playing c5. All of their pieces, they're not really, you know, working together towards like a clear united goal. They're all just sort of doing their own thing, bouncing around, being really erratic. And did I just blunder actually? So rook takes e5, knight takes e5, f4. That was a really good speech I was giving, but unfortunately that could be a concrete issue. So maybe in that case though, so like oh, okay, never mind. He just fumbles it immediately. So then I take. Yeah, so then I take. And I'm pretty sure rook takes e5 would have actually been strong for him though. That's really pathetic that I overlooked that. But yeah, like doesn't this work? Takes f4 because knight f3 takes, and then this is defended, I'm pretty sure. So anyways, king h1 should make a move. Just simply take. If he goes knight e4, bishop f3, looks problematic. So probably takes, but then I just take this obviously and pawn up, attack. And yeah, I don't see any clear counterplay for the opponent. Yeah, it looked like an almost perfect game, except for, yeah, the small fact that, yeah, it didn't quite work, did it? Maybe we had to, we'll analyze afterwards. Try first figuring out what to do without the computer maybe. But yeah, it definitely felt like we had a nice position. So like I'm sure there were some other options we had that would have kept quite a substantial advantage, but yeah, in that very moment it felt like we slipped up a little bit. But like yeah, if nothing else really happens, next we're going to play rook f2 and we're just going to roll their head off. So I don't think this is too great for them. Maybe they can try bishop to g2, trying to like soften up, like trying to solidify this diagonal against like any potential checks. But even then, can we maybe play rook f2, like rook g1 and bishop f3? Maybe, because if they take, that's mate. They can take for the queen and sack that off, but it's hard to believe that that's gonna save the game for them. So I guess if we wanted to avoid the queen sack, we could also play like, okay, this is game weird at this point, but yeah, we could also go like, instead of this way, we could go this way, and then they don't have this, sacking the queen, which I mean, like, You know, obviously at that point, if we're trying to avoid queen sacks, we're doing pretty well. But okay, queen to c3. I mean, we can at the very least just take, and the endgame should be completely winning. But at the same time, like, I feel like we have quite a nice attack going on, and I kind of want to keep that going. So, okay, let's just go queen to f2. Threaten bishop f3 and kind of mate. So I think he has to go bishop to g2, I've calculated. And then we're going to go bishop to f3 next. And if they take, then we take and we just keep bringing pieces in. And looks quite nice. There is also maybe bishop g2, rook f3, and if they take that, of course, that's going to be mate, but they don't have to take the rook, but maybe that's also quite interesting, I must say, because, like, I mean, they kind of have to move the queen somewhere, and I don't see a clear good square for them. They might have to go backwards. They could go forwards, though, to one of these squares. Okay, let's just keep it simple, though. Let's just go bishop to f3. I don't believe this should be making any sort of blunder. So takes, and okay, we could play queen takes and swap the queens off, but I'm gonna go rook takes. I'm gonna try to keep the attack going. So let's go rook takes f3, and then we can just bring the other rook. The queen also can't stay on this diagonal. They have to like go off elsewhere, and that's a good thing for us because it doesn't eliminate any of these rook e7 and trying to mate on g7 ideas, and we can just go all in focused on our attack and trying to finish them off. So yeah, they're getting down to the final seconds here. Queen to somewhere. Okay, so queen to c1, and yeah, let's just continue bringing in old pieces. Okay, that, and I was about to play this, but that would unfortunately blunder the queen, so let's not do that. Queen to d4 looks fairly logical. Another move that I quite like the look of could just be rook to d3, rook to d2, and then try to align this rook on the 7th rank. That's what I was trying to do with queen e2, but of course has the issue with just hanging the queen. So rook to d3, I don't see a clear way that they can combat that. Maybe they can try to beg for a queen trade, but after rook d2 anyway and allowing the swap of queens, we can come in and then we can like clean up, I think. So yeah, let's try rook to d3. Okay, we see queen to e1. And I was thinking rook d2, but we can even give a check first and then go rook d2. That might be even stronger, leading to some sort of mate. So let's try that. Yeah, so let's go check. And oh wait, I'm stupid. We don't have rook d2 anymore. Okay. It should be fine though. We are still much better, but okay, that was a bit of a brain fart. Don't know what I was thinking. So let's go rook c3. Try to go rook to c2. Okay, that does not stop rook to c2, and I don't see how they can stop this. Okay, they flag, and let's take a quick look at that. So I felt like overall that was quite one-sided. We'll request a computer analysis, but just hiding the moves first of all. I don't want to spoil this for myself and for you guys. So I was thinking around this point we were doing quite well, but then like we seem to spoil things quite quickly. So maybe, for example, like something like queen to f7 could make some sense, trying to get off this diagonal and only then go for e5. That could be one potential idea. There was also the thing we were talking about earlier, like knight e7, bishop h7, knight f5. And that would resolve maybe that issue, because then, like, of course, after e5 unfolds, they're not going to have bishop d4 if our knight's seen on f5. So that could be quite interesting. Let's check that with the engine though. So I think those two possibilities make quite a bit of sense. So yeah, e5 actually turns out to be a mistake. And yeah, okay, bishop g4 we see is a big fat blunder, because takes, and yeah, rook takes e5. But then they played bishop takes e5, which you can see is also a huge blunder. So yeah, let's check that. So it seems the engine wants to play bishop g4. Okay, but we can also see some of our suggestions like queen to f7 and knight to e7 are there. So it's good to see that like the engine is echoing some of what we were suggesting. And yeah, I was thinking like knight f5. Let's just say they play some random moves. And now we maybe try to go for e5. Maybe not though, with all the pressure on here. There could be some sort of weird bishop h6 or something, I'm not too sure. Knight f3 maybe. Okay, so how would we approach this position? Like, engine just wants to go king h8. Maybe like rook f7 somehow. We defend the pawn laterally and then we bring this rook in. Because the only issue at the moment is we can't activate this rook because it's tied down to defending that pawn on b7. But of course we would like to bring this rook into the game. But yeah, okay, let's just go from the start. So Yeah, this is all quite like normal stuff. One thing I'll note is that in a variety of positions, you sort of have to watch out for like maybe knight to e1, but the key idea here is that we can just play pawn to h5, and okay, you can see some of the statistics are not so great in the Lee chess database. But if you go into the masters, I think it's a lot more sort of normal. Usually black is sort of doing okay from these positions. So I'm not sure why it scores so badly, but one of the points is if they take, this is suicidal because queen h4, and we have this along here. They can kind of defend with g4, but this isn't going to turn out so well. So queen g4, we just take this. And then it's important to note the arising pawn structure from this sort of position is quite favorable for black, because we sort of have just one very compact pawn island, whereas white has this one and then two pawn islands. And also because they sort of exchange light squared bishops often, this is an endgame and their central pawns are on dark squares, they're sort of stuck with this crappy dark squared bishop, and they're just going to feel a lot of pain in this endgame. Knight e7 to f5, c5 eventually. Black's pieces just work together very harmoniously, where the same cannot be said for white. So anyways, we saw this, and you can see already the scores quite well for black. And we really haven't done anything special. I think a lot of these moves, if you follow in the Lee chess database, actually are sort of the most common for white. So after knight g6, okay, most common is actually knight bd2, but that's even worse because then black has knight to f4 and we win the bishop here. If yeah, this one though, bishop e3, okay, it's actually the fourth common move. I don't know why. Whenever I've played this move, almost always I face bishop e3, but okay, f6 eventually takes c4, queen to b3, and yeah, rook to b8 is top move, because like as you can see, b6 and this pawn gets quite weak, as I was saying, so it seems to be important. Castles, h6 is actually top move, funny enough. Bishop c7, and okay, this was a mistake, this was a bit too hasty, and then yeah, we should have just taken on f3 at this point. We asked for a bit too much out of the position. This would have been strong, except yeah, takes, and rook e5, yeah, f4 was a bit of a problem, but after that I think it was pretty clean. Yeah, maybe we played one slow move with rook to c3. I think that was maybe or like rook d3 maybe, but no, okay, the engine still thinks this was, sorry, I think it was, yeah, queen f3 was the one that was maybe a bit slow. Maybe just go rook d2 here, but regardless, we're so winning that it's like even if we play one slow move, it doesn't really matter so much. So okay, overall pretty clean game, I would say. And yeah, just remember when you face this short variation, knight e7 to g6, there are many different lines you can play, but this is definitely a pretty fun one if you can get this on the board. Yeah, give it a try. Okay, here we go. Let's go for Caro-kann, and let's see what Mr. V6105 has in store for us. Okay, so an exchange variation, or maybe they're going to go for the Panov. Okay, they go for a Panov. Let's go knight f6. Just keep developing as the center. And we see a very early knight to f3. So there's a few different approaches we can take to this. I'm going to play a very early g6 though. This is a very thematic move where we basically, it maybe doesn't have the best reputation, but basically it has a very logical foundation, which is that we're trying to play a bishop to g7 and take aim at the d4 pawn. And they play a very early c5, which is interesting. This is sometimes an idea in the Panov, but I think in this position probably is not the best. But we're going to keep developing. And the reason this is not the best is that, okay, it releases a lot of pressure on the d5 pawn, but specifically because we're playing the setup where, you know, we have the bishop on g7, it's especially more easy to kind of attack this point. But okay, they're going for this very, you know, bold strategy where they're trying to just gain a lot of space on the queen side. But I think there's several problems with this. So, you know, if you have really taken some time to notice, they have really neglected kind of their overall development. They've also given up the bishop here. We're heading like castling as well. Their king is still in the center. So there's a few tempting options we have in this position. I would encourage you maybe to pause the video already and try to take a little bit of a think about how you would kind of approach this position. But yeah, basically, bishop to g4 is a very logical move I'm thinking of, pinning the knight. I was thinking this would be one of their ideas, either to go like knight to e5 or h3. Both of those avoid this bishop g4 idea. And knight e5, for example, would force us to defend this. I think it should still be okay. We probably need to like protect the pawn, maybe like bishop b7, which looks slightly ugly for now, but we're going to kick the knight out very quickly is the idea with knight to d7, and then we should probably kind of be okay. Maybe bishop d7 was also an idea in this position after bishop b5. We'll check that afterwards, but I think castles is probably good enough. And the other idea I'm considering is knight to e4. This is like another very logical idea. If they went h3, for example, I'd start definitely considering this move. Maybe also bishop a6, trying to just cut the king off from castling. There's another logical one. But if they go like, for example, here, like we go knight e4, obviously you can see if they take already, there's a lot of pressure on this pawn and they need to be very careful. So that all being said and done though, however, I'm going to play bishop to g4, I think is quite a logical move. And if they play like pawn to a3, then I intend to just take, go knight to d7, attack the pawn. And if bishop e3, so yeah, they're playing like very, natural looking moves, but I think that already after bishop e3, e5, the black is not only equal, but I think more than equal, and we're actually better. So this is like a very common way that you see a lot of people who maybe only have like a very rudimentary understanding of the position will play. They'll sort of play moves which, like, maybe in some positions are okay, like in some of these e6 lines, these will be good moves, but in this position, I think unfortunately lead them to some problems. And we see knight to e2, so knight to e2 defends this, but again, I would encourage you to pause the video here, take a little bit of a think. But basically, I will tell you what I'm thinking. So when I see this, I personally see a position in which white is really still behind in development. You can see their rooks are, like, for example, not connected. They've spent a lot of time like just making irrelevant pawn moves, moving the same piece twice, getting their queen out early. Their coordination feels a little bit off. They're also not threatening to take, of course, because then like we'd have takes. They have to move their queen, knight d3, and then would win their rook. And personally, I don't feel like e takes d4 or like pushing with e4 would be the right call. I feel like this would close the center and sort of protect them from various troubles. And if we went like e takes d4, that could be good, I think. But I think it also pays off to just keep the tension for now. And to me, a move like a5 looks very tempting. And they can't really go a3 because takes, and then their rook would hang. If they take it, that's of course beneficial for us. And if they go b5, trying to get in like take c6, well, at the very least, I think we can go takes in that position. Or we could just go takes immediately before they even get any of this business in. So I'm just going to go a5, feels like a very strong move to me. And it feels like we can sort of see white's position crumbling now where, they've built up this very formidable looking sort of, maybe some people won't think so, but perhaps our opponent sort of feels that way. But yeah, then sort of just doesn't really work out. I actually just remembered, so another idea I was thinking of was actually if b5, knight takes e5 maybe, and if takes we get e4 and we attack the queen, and also we attack the rook with the discovered attack, and then we're winning material. So that could also be quite strong. I guess we could also go, this might be a bit brutal, but takes and then knight c5 as well is another way to do that. Not sure which is stronger, but we also do just have takes we shouldn't forget about. So yeah, I'm just gonna I guess if c takes b5, they do get queen takes d5. That looks so sketchy, like their development is so bad there that I don't really believe in that, but I guess it does have to be sort of considered. But okay, I'm just gonna go e4 first, I think. The idea, of course, is when they move their queen, then we can also just play takes in this move order, or we could even play c takes b5 first, and then try to consider those sort of options. So yeah, I'm just gonna take, and after takes. I was just spending a little bit of time confirming this because I wasn't so sure if I have to be worried about b6 and them creating a past protected pawn, but I feel like that's too slow because we get in a very quick d4, and then it feels like we're sort of breaking apart this position. Like they move the bishop somewhere, we get queen to d5, we attack c5, and yeah, I don't really believe in that. So okay, takes, bishop takes, b6, d4. They do get bishop h6, for example, but even that, we just go rook to e8, and maybe we do have to be slightly careful, but yeah, I don't know. I don't feel too convinced by that, but okay, they end up going takes, which, yeah, I wasn't really scared of because I thought we just give a check now, and then like we just come in after their king moves and loses castling right, swoop up the c6 pawn, and we're just better. So yeah, so far this game, we haven't done really anything too special, all just very natural moves. And yeah, we see this as well, which is sending off some alarm bells. Like, I feel like we might want to consider as well, like a4, trying to give a check. But rook c8 definitely feels like enough. So, okay, I'm just going to keep it simple. I'm just going to go rook to c8, collect the pawn. And yeah, I mean, not only if we win the pawn are we going to be a pawn up, but we're also just going to have a huge lead in development. Okay, we see rook c1, which is interesting, but I'm going to take that. And okay, it's obviously a positional sacrifice, at least I think it is. So the idea is, again, I think is that, okay, like they, you know, get to keep the pawn and they're willing to really lose the exchange for that. And that's fair enough, I guess. I was thinking rook c7 trying to blockade that, but then bishop f4 looks slightly annoying. So okay, I am looking at queen b6. They will get c7 then. And to be honest, I'm not going to decide or look any further. I think that I just sort of, this is a position where I should just make the move. So I'm just going to make the move and then decide what to do next, because the only other realistic option is block the pawn. But again, we saw bishop f4 and at least it doesn't seem to really lead to anything of much that option. So it seems logical to just allow this. And okay, it is slightly complicated, but I'm thinking of maybe, because like this sort of position at the moment, like if we just chuck our queen there, I don't think it's going to be able to do much. So I think what we want to do is try to bring in all of our pieces. So for example, bringing this rook to e7 attacking, this is certainly one thing I'm looking at. Again, they can always protect that and back it up with the bishop. The moment they do that, however, they do also hang d4, which is something to be wary of. Another idea though that I quite like the look of is maybe also going bishop f8, bishop b4, and really just hammering our bishop down white's throat. Hopefully that isn't too graphic, but okay, they're sort of preparing for that. And again, rook to e7 is sort of what I'm thinking of. I'm going to do that. Bishop to f4, and then I do feel like we can just take that, to be honest. Like, maybe it looks slightly risky giving up the dark squared bishop, but I think if we grab this d4 pawn, I feel like that position is really the glue that's holding together white's position. And if we can just chop that off, yeah, I don't know, it feels like a pretty difficult position. Probably too difficult to really hold at that point. So, I mean, king to e1, I do get this, though, because like that does make some of our ideas like bishop f8, bishop b4 a little bit less strong if they can just sort of escape the king. Because the whole idea of this would be to sort of keep the king in sort of what we'd call the kill zone, right? You could think the kill zone is sort of like this area, but if the king sort of escapes it, then like, you know, it doesn't really make much sense to have the bishop here. You could argue maybe that's an argument for trying to play queen b4 check or something before the king managed to come to e1, maybe. But okay, we see knight here, which I'm not sure I fully understand. So if we go take, and okay, if they go take, we can also give a check. Rook here, queen c2, boom, something like that. I mean, I don't have all the lines fully figured out, but that looks pretty winning, so I'm just going to take. And yeah, okay, so we take back, obviously, and now knight takes d5. Maybe they thought they were winning something, but like we just give a check, and then that brings the end to all of that. So yeah, I don't think that's like a super hard variation to calculate, but I guess, like, you know, their position is losing anyway. It's like sort of they have to try something, so I won't, you know, shitting the opponent too much for missing that. But okay, king to e2, we can give a check. I feel this one is slightly more compelling, the queen d3 option. King to e1, and rook to c2 feels like it should just sort of end the game, but we do have to watch out for queen to b8 check here, and maybe there's some sort of fancy stuff they have. We can also go rook to b7 though, which perhaps is a cleaner method of trying to round out the game. Wait, hold on, is there also... No. So I was thinking if I can go like check here, and then take this, but then of course that's also hanging at the end, so I can't quite go for that option, unfortunately. But rook b7 I do quite like the look of. Like, we stop this check, we threaten this one. Of course, rook c1 isn't a possibility, but yeah, from here, I don't quite see how they kind of finish us off. If they go like queen f4, trying to meet rook b1 with bishop c1, I think... Well, actually, then we have a... Oh, wait, do we? No, we don't. So I was thinking queen b1, queen b5 then, because this wouldn't be hanging, but then they'd still go bishop c1. I'm just going to go rook b7 for now and sort of force them to make the decision, because they might not even find queen f4, right? But even if they play queen f4, it's not like we losing our advantage. We have plenty of options there, so like at the very least we can just, you know, take on d4, but our rook's hanging first of all, so we sort of need to deal with that. Yeah, like queen f4 for example, we take. If they take that, then rook b1 is going to be leading to mate, so they could consider some other options, but like, okay, let's say like queen f4 take and they try to like go for some knight check that doesn't really work. Well, then we can just snap that off. And I thought that their queen was protecting that somehow, but okay, I think I'm under the influence of too much chess at this point, but yeah, I think that's a case in point though. Like I don't see a way for them to really hold together the position. The down material, their king safety is horrendous. Yeah, so okay, so trying to initiate some queen exchange, which obviously is losing for them if we go for that. But I'm tempted as well just to go queen c4 rather, and just fork these pieces. I think that's just like ending the game. So there maybe is like queen to c3 as a last ditch effort, and like some bishop f8 stuff, but I mean, come on, right? Like that can't really work. So I'm just gonna go queen to c4. Worst case scenario, we just bail out still into that sort of winning endgame, but like, yeah, this feels like it's the, you know, easiest way to sort of just finish off the game. So like queen c3, I was just thinking that takes here and then bishop to a3, but yeah, that feels pretty hard to really believe in. Okay, knight c3 I kind of forgot about, but surely we just take this. Bishop d2, then we can probably just take and rook b1, or we have only something probably. Yeah, so rook b1, right? Yeah, let's go rook b1. And if king d1, then probably just bishop b2 to be honest. Oh, bishop b2, maybe they have a check, so we have to be slightly cautious of that. But okay, queen f4 though, I don't really understand if we just... Oh no, they still have queen b8 check. I'm stupid. So okay, let's give a check here first. And if king f1, just queen d3 maybe, just edge our way in there. Maybe bishop e5 is also interesting. Of course, if they take it, it's gonna lose the game pretty quickly. And if they come back, I think we just come here. We threaten to exchange queens, and if they oblige, then we take back, and that's going to just end the game because their knight's going to be kicked away from defending the bishop. And if they go somewhere else, they take the pawn on a5, we're going to take on c1. If they just do nothing, then we're going to take something, and we're going to probably be winning. I don't know how better to explain that, but maybe they have queen e1, really? No, we take that. So yeah, we just take, they go queen to e1, and then like, yeah. Okay, he resigns. So yeah, I think pretty much the whole game we were dominating. Oh, there's already an entrant graph here. Let's see this. We have two inaccuracies. What are the two inaccuracies? So inaccuracy 1, rook c8. Okay, was it a4? Queen b6 apparently. Oh, I guess that makes sense because it's running takedown various checks. If they sack the exchange, we go here and then we take. Okay, I mean, we're already winning by that point, but okay, what's the other one? So, okay, so wants us to keep the knight there. That's fair enough. I mean, the knight is a pretty strong piece. So, okay, that makes sense. But yeah, I think all in all, the game was pretty smooth. Okay, that's interesting. So the engine wants us to go bishop g4 first. I guess that eliminates some of these options like knight e5 we were talking about earlier. I was mentioning bishop b7, knight d7. I was hesitant to go for this because of bishop f4, but there's knight h5, which is very nice there. So like, okay, then if they castle, knight d7 takes, we get an e5 next. And like, we're already fine in this position because their whole idea with going for this is to keep a bind on us, stopping us from going e5, from really activating our pieces. But if we can like sort of push them back a little bit, then it's pretty harmless, this whole sort of thing. You can see the engine actually doesn't hate it, but I have a feeling if we go into like the database, for example, and look at the stats, it will score pretty badly. So yeah, you can see already it's like black already scores better, which, you know, move 7 is probably not a great sign. Yeah, a lot of people go bishop b5, and if they take, then especially if they allow like bishop g4, then yeah, this is getting already into not so great territory. Especially b4 is even worse because then they'll just neglect the development entirely. And then yeah, as we were sort of talking about, it should be pretty good. Queen b8, okay, maybe b5 I think was the only real try. And then yeah, there's a few different things we can do, but I think this one was definitely good enough. I was seriously considering this as we were sort of discussing in b6, but d4 I mentioned here, and Wow, okay, this is actually okay for them because I guess the bishop's in trouble. So it wants us to just go d3, sack back the exchange. That, I mean, that makes sense actually. I can accept that. Or actually, it even wants us to take with the king. Okay, fair enough. Yeah, like around this point, I don't know how much more we need to look at this. This one I was expecting when I was gonna take here though. And that's one of the top moves that wants us to go rook d7 first. And then maybe take. Okay, that's interesting. It even wants us to sack back the exchange if they go for that. I mean, that also makes sense. The pawn is quite annoying. So yeah, quite interesting to note several points in this game where we sort of have to let go of our sort of desire to hold on to material, you could say, and focus more on the quality of the pieces and also kind of what's left on the board. But yeah, all in all, pretty clean game. Good illustration of, especially in the Panov and why it goes for this sort of early c5, how things can sort of go wrong if they're not careful. Another Caro-kann. Here we go. So d4, d5. 93. So yeah, against this, usually you just take. And now this is sort of where we have a few options. So I'm just going to play bishop f5. To me, this has always been the most logical way to play the Caro-kann. Knight g3 is the normal response, attacking the bishop with tempo. It's very popular these days to go for like knight f6 and move forward and then going for this sort of Tartakawa structure, but personally I'm not a big fan of that. I prefer this more sort of classical approach, which is developing the bishop outside the pawn chain and then going e6. And yeah, it's basically just a very logical way to play, develop the pieces, castle, and eventually probably aim for c5. But it does lead to a very interesting dynamic in this position, as you can see, where, you know, there is opposite side castling, of course, especially in these lines where white goes for an early h4. They're sort of indicating, right, they're probably going to be trying to go with some sort of aggressive stuff. So we need to be careful. I should mention the oldest going back way of sort of playing this position is to play like queen c7, long castles, but eventually the position sort of evolved such that modern theory dictated that black should probably be going for actually short castles. And yeah, I'm just going to castle short here. There are some other moves maybe we could try, but I don't think there should be anything horribly wrong with castling short here. What I am thinking, by the way, though, is that right now I'm trying to compare the positions in my head, because there are... The main line I would probably say is in this position white usually plays h5, kicks the bishop back, and then plays bishop d3. But it's sort of become more popular in recent times for people to sort of just keep the pawn on h4 and not bother gaining the tempo, going bishop d3 immediately, as we saw in this position. So knight to e4, though, this all looks quite logical so far. And knight to e4, yeah, obviously makes some contact, but also very importantly, something you need to understand about this position is that they're also opening the way for the g-pawn. And that's very important to understand because, of course, given the fact that white's castle long, they're looking to attack on the king side. So we always need to be watching out for this pawn break. For now, I don't think it's like a huge deal, but, you know, we can't turn a blind eye to that. We always have to be kind of thinking about, okay, what if they go for like g4, what if they go for g5, what if they just try to roll our face over? That needs to be a constant consideration. But I think for now, this looks pretty normal what's going on. I don't think g4 is a huge issue. I think we can take, and if they try to bring a rook to the g file, you might want to just pause and think, what would we do there? But assuming you've given that a bit of a think, I think either we go f5 or we go h5. I was personally thinking f5, but yeah, nonetheless, so we see instead of that, this knight e5 move, which is, yeah, something I'm familiar with, again, in the other position where h5, the pawn is already here. But one thing to notice, the difference between the pawn being on h4 and h5, is that when g4 comes, g5, they can always take back with this pawn, and that in some ways does make the attack more dangerous. But there's also some drawbacks of not having the pawn on h5. These might become relevant in this game, we'll have to see. But yeah, after knight e5, at least when the pawn is on h5, the typical way to play is queen to e4. And I should mention queen to d5. You might be wondering, why am I playing this? But one of the main ideas is to really just control the light squares. It's one of the most common themes in the Caro-kann. Like on move 1, right, this is and we'll move 2 as well, these are both helping control the light squares. Bishop f5, again, we're playing on the light squares, very recurring theme in many lines. And with knight to e5 in this position, Well, sorry, I was still talking about queen d5. So we're basically trying to crown this whole strategy by bringing the queen to e4, exchanging queens, and then sort of playing this endgame. And black actually has decent chances there, I believe. Sometimes as well, we also like storm these pawns over on the queen side, try to attack the king, but I'm just going to continue with queen to e4. I don't see anything hugely wrong with it. If they try to avoid the queen exchange with, say, something like bishop to e3, then we can go, I believe, knight to d5 and sort of take that bishop eventually, and I think we're sort of doing okay. Of course, it's important to notice that if f3 trying to kick the queen, then we just simply take because the knight's attacking. That's one of the key points of going for this. Otherwise, our queen would look a little bit stupid and then start pushing us back and we're in trouble. So knight d5, it's a very important move to play. Without it, we would probably just be worse. And this is where, you know, our opponent has to make some decisions. And yeah, I think all in all though, like black is doing pretty decently. We can take this eventually, bring the rook to d8, maybe stamp the bishop on f6, go c5, after we've taken on e3 probably. And yeah, I think that all in all we're doing pretty fine. They do go for g4 though, so they're showing some aggressive intent. We need to be a little bit careful. However, I think for now we can probably just take. So I'm going to take that, get rid of the bishop. And yeah, so here's a few things that we can think about. Of course, it needs to be at the forefront of our minds. What if g5 happens? Even if we can, you know, win this pawn, we probably don't want to do that. I think that's incredibly suicidal because after queen h5, bishop h6, they bring all the pieces around to the king side. It feels like it's just a matter of time until black's position completely falls apart. So I would be trying to think, for example, of something like maybe bishop d6, trying to remove the knight, or like c5. c5 could run into knight d7, but I think personally I'm not really scared of that. Like rook d8, they take, and I don't know, that pawn on c5 feels like it should be dying, but maybe it's not that simple. There is also a question of how bad is it if like we allow g5 and them to take and we just put the king on h7. That is also something I'm thinking about. For example, bishop f6, g5, of course I don't want to take that again, but one option could be to go takes, queen takes e5, if g takes h6. Let's say for now I just take and they like come around, give a check. If we go king h7 there, I'm not like completely convinced that we should be terrified of that. There is also another option though, so let's say this takes. Maybe takes and they come in with the rook to d7 is another option, and they can sort of try to attack the pawns from this way. That is slightly, it does appear slightly annoying, I should say. But I guess I am thinking, what if we use a similar logic? So like c5, g5, and we take, well, maybe it's not too scary to just allow this, but like, you know, after takes, of course they can't take the pawn because the queen hangs, and if they take the rook, then this guy hangs over here, so and also the knight. So oh right, but they do have knight d7, which I mentioned earlier. But yeah, I think at the very least rook c, I didn't think about that one, but takes, and if all these exchanges happen, I think we're doing okay. So c5, let's do a final check. I feel like this is doing relatively okay here, so I'm just gonna play c5. I cannot see anything terribly wrong with this move. Like let's say they go g5, for example, takes. Okay, so he avoids it first of all, queen f2. That makes some sense because now he can take back the pawn. And okay, if I go bishop f6, is also knight d7. Also, did I forget about bishop f6, knight d7 here? I think I did. Okay, that's a bit of a, yeah, it would have been a bit of an unfortunate thing to overlook, I think, but okay. Now one interesting thing to note is maybe if g5 happens, maybe we can consider h5 since this isn't directly attacking h5 anymore. We always need to watch out for g6 though coming on the very next move, and perhaps that still does some damage to our structure. One thing I'm thinking about as well is f6 maybe, just kicking the knight, and let's say it comes to d7 again, like rook c8, and they try to like, they could potentially try g5 there. I think in that sort of position, if takes, bishop takes g5 though, I'm not too scared actually about the lines opening up in front of the king. I feel like if we have the bishop there things are sort of being held together. So actually f6 looks slightly counterintuitive, but I think actually I like the look of that in terms of helping keep things together. So yeah, let's go for f6 actually, and I mean maybe they could play a move like queen to f3, that looks interesting. The idea just being, of course, that like maybe don't really want to move the knight, they can't figure out a good square for it. For example, maybe they're scared I'm going to take the pawn, which I'm not sure I will, it's a possibility though. So they try to go queen f3, and then basically we won't have time to take the knight because our queen is hanging first. So most likely the way we're going to continue after that is just take the queen and then play out this endgame. I don't know what the evaluation is, maybe white has a tiny edge, but it feels like to me, okay, they end up going for that. I'm just checking, by the way, this guy's rating. What country is this? I have no idea what country that is. Okay, takes though. And rook 88. I didn't realize I'm so low on time, probably because I'm doing a lot of talking, but yeah, the one thing that sticks out to me though is if white goes g5, then like maybe they have some chances for a little bit of an edge. But we see c3, which I guess is a move. I didn't consider that so much. It feels slightly passive, but okay, fair enough. I was briefly thinking about doubling up here. If you go here, you do sort of maybe allow some e4 or c4. Whether that's good or not is maybe another question, but if you go rook d7, for example, that's too, I don't know what the word is, but it doesn't feel like it works because d takes c5, rook's under attack. If you exchange and then take on c5, you allow rook d7 at the end. So I'm just going to play king f7 for now, bring the king a little bit closer to the action. Maybe I can try to shoot for some sort of like b5, b4 action at some point in the future, but yeah, for now I'm a bit undecided, and I think just bringing the king in can't really hurt. And like, look, I think you could say that the logical outcome of the game is a draw, but definitely there's still a lot of like hidden potential in the position, I feel like, so I don't mind sort of playing this on a little bit to see what happens. Okay, they're aligning the rook with our king. I don't think that's too scary. They might be aiming for some sort of g5 business, but again, I'm not too afraid. I'm just gonna go b5 at this point, I feel like. Expand a little bit on the queen side. If they take and go knight to d4, I think we can just play a6, protect the pawn. We're not gonna freak out and take them. At least I don't think that's a plan. Oh wait, am I an idiot? I'm gonna overlook knight to e5. Yeah, I mean, I think we're still doing okay there, but yeah, I for some reason only considered these ideas, but I didn't look at knight to e5, which is completely idiotic. Because now, like, yeah, they might just be winning a pawn, and if they win that, I think they're winning. So that's incredibly stupid, actually. To allow that. Wow, okay, they missed it. I guess their idea is to come around this way, but yeah, that's a pretty horrible miss by both of us, I think. So bishop d6 is what I'm. Oh, but then do they get take 95 anyway? Tough to say. So where should I go with the king? Maybe e8, or how do we do this? Okay, let's just go king e8 for now. We'll probably put the rook here, maybe the bishop here, and then we bring the rook around somewhere around this side, or we go bishop d6 and some more thing. I think that should sort of work. Of course, we don't want to go king d7 the next move because this would hang, but yeah, that was really lucky that we avoided that. But I think, yeah, knight h4 next move, probably rook f7, knight g6, bishop d6, and okay, game continues on a little bit, but yeah, really horrible oversight there. So I'm going rook f7. Again, I don't know what the evaluation is. I really don't, but I guess we could always turn on stockfish, but I've heard that's not allowed. Not sure why, but I've heard there's been some, I don't know, grandmasters have tried that in the tournament recently. Apparently that didn't work out for them so well. Again, no idea why, but anyhow, so e4, definitely interesting. So are they trying to go for e5 maybe? That could be slightly annoying. I have to say our opponent is playing awfully well this game, it feels like. I don't want to insinuate anything. I want to be careful of doing that. I feel like this is not a standard of play that is quote unquote unachievable, but yeah. Okay, so e5 for now, takes. Okay, I was thinking takes first, but then rook f8 would lead to mate. So e5, maybe we just play bishop to e7, we keep the tension. Actually, I think is a better way to go about it, and then just take. And if they take, I think that structure is fine for us. So yeah, in fact, they have to be slightly careful now because with the pawn on e4, this guy on d4 is also a little bit more loose. So maybe king c2 just to protect this guy, because otherwise, like, yeah, we might go takes, bishop c5, add another attacker, and they can't take because the rook on d1 hangs at the end. So king to d1 feels like the correct way to go about that. Bishop e7 is what I said I'd do, so I'm going to do that. And I don't know, it feels like they sort of mucked this up a little bit. Like, feels like they kind of tried to force something onto the position, but it just didn't really work. This is like a common mistake. I mean, I don't know whether it's a mistake yet. Maybe they have something here. But yeah, it is quite common for people like to sort of get a bit, or like for example, maybe knight f4. But knight f4, okay, they didn't play that. I was thinking like knight f4, king f7, d5 could be quite annoying, and takes e6. Not sure if that was a thing, but okay. Do we take the bishop, or what are we doing? I kind of like the look of it, so I'm gonna do that. Of course they can't take for now because the rook is hanging, but did I allow rook here, or can I just take and then go king f7? I think I can just do that. So there is a bit of a question now. What do they do about the d4 pawn? This whole endgame has actually been surprisingly like very move by move, in the sense that like it hasn't been very strategic at all. It's been quite just like whites just try to like throw a bunch of stuff at us and like really attack. So I think I can take that. And king f7 there. Of course that would drop, but we do have to watch out for like if we just put our king randomly there, perhaps there's some sort of 95 tactical ideas, right? Oh, they have that. I'm not sure that leads to anything though, because takes and materials equal, and we're also sort of have an active rook, so I'm not terribly scared of that, to be honest. Maybe they have some other move, but I don't know. It feels like we're sort of holding it together from what I can see. We like, okay, if they move their rook away, then we probably gotta get the hell out of there and avoid that. But like once we do, I'm not massively concerned, I must say. Feels like we're again really holding it down. So yeah, rook e4. So yeah, king g8 is what I want to do, or at least what I feel like I should do, because this is problematic. If I go rook d5, then allow rook e7. Actually, they still get that, but it's not a fork. So yeah, king g8. Temporarily a bit of a passive move, typically not something you want to do in an endgame, but yeah, feels like here a reasonable judgment call. I'm just going to take that. I don't think I'm overlooking any ridiculous tactics. And if they go take, then, well, they need to defend. Maybe not need to. They could try to sacrifice it for some activity, but like, if they were to try and protect it, then they might allow rook d2. Speaking of rook d2, that looks quite tempting. We could also go take, and then rook d2. So okay, let's go rook d2. Probably rook e2 unless they try to give a check, which I'm not sure does much. In fact, I think that would destroy their position, because after takes, king f7, we have to make sure to not get made in the corner. But after that happens, right, then like their rook's under attack and they can't defend b2. So either they go here or they try to do rook b4. But rook b4 looks really awkward after like a6. The rook looks horribly misplaced, so I don't think we're gonna be seeing that move, but it is always a possibility that our opponent might freak out a little bit. And also it's a bit embarrassing, but I just noticed after this we also have bishop takes b2, which I'm not sure how I just noticed, but like rather how I didn't see for all that time. But now that I look at it closer though, rook e8, I don't think that works. So okay, I'm just going to go a5, just keep the tension. Also stop any perhaps rook b4 ideas, and we could perhaps try to poke around a little bit with like a4 and a3 and try to weaken the dark squares. I think if we can get that in, or maybe like something like that, that could be a little bit frightening for them. So I want to give this a shot. I think they can probably put like something like a3 at some point though and sort of be okay. But yeah, as I was saying, okay, let's go b4. So okay, I kind of messed up a little bit. I just made a move because I got down to like 1 second. But okay, I have to take that because otherwise they kind of win a pawn. But now I go here, and this is still some chances. I think there was a more accurate way for them to do that there, but or maybe there wasn't. But okay, I think this is okay. Rook e4, b3 is slightly annoying for them because there's some stuff they have to deal with. Okay, so do we have just rook d3? I guess king a2 is 0 point. Okay, let's still go for rook d3 anyway. King a2 and maybe we have this. Is that winning? Oh, I guess they have, yes, they have knight e5. But after this one, fuck, almost flagged. I don't really have time to think at this point, but yeah, okay, this is probably going to be a draw. I do have one final hope though, so if I can maybe win the pawn there, maybe, but like the problem is that, yeah, that's really not going to lead to anything, I think. Oh, we have to even be slightly careful we don't allow them to get a more dangerous pass pawn. So, okay, I'm going to bring the rook back to d4, cut it off. I don't want that king getting too active. But yeah, I'm just going to offer the guy a draw. I think this is a pretty, yeah, like impossible position to win. He agrees. Let's check that out real quick. I feel like we had a chance towards the end, or just chances in general. This was all pretty much fine. Rook a d8, king f7. So maybe we had to pay slightly more attention to whatever was going on the king side. Perhaps also we could have just gone rook a d8, and then they're also going to go queen f3 here, and then maybe, okay, Engine's pointing out f5. This is actually a more common resource than you might think in the Caro-kann. Again, we're sort of playing on the light squares, and if they take, sort of, we could play rook takes f5, and like the rook starts getting quite active, and this is a pleasant position for black. But yeah, f6, even though it's slightly ugly, I've seen this move before in many Caro-kann positions, feels okay. But yeah, as I mentioned, I just like completely overlooked this idea, and then like, okay, they're probably gonna get this position, d takes c5, b4, and they're completely, it's plus 1.2, but it feels like black has no counterplay. I would feel like this is practically lost, but they do get this resource. I wasn't sure. Okay, d5, they get that. I can imagine this is an advantage. So the reason being simply that they're like, okay, if we ever go e5, then like, you know, we have a lot of weak light squares, and kind of if we take as well, it still feels kind of similar. But e4, it felt like sort of this wasn't as bad. But as I mentioned, knight f4 actually, yeah, quite annoying. King f7, d5, which fortunately they didn't find. But yeah, I had a feeling something was a bit off there. So it wants us to go take. Okay. Yeah, because the issue, of course, with taking this way is that if you, well, you can't even take, but if you could, there would be simply mate there. But yeah, what was I guess I just didn't consider this, but apparently they're still better after this. The bishop moves somewhere and they take here first and then they take, very fancy. But yeah, this one, wow, okay, g5, yeah, so a lot of tactical resources that we just were quite careless of. So a bit lucky, definitely, on our part. But after this, it felt like we're sort of the ones who are in charge. But yeah, okay, like, definitely fumbled it a bit here. So wait, takes? Oh, what am I talking about? I could have played this. Yeah, because king f7. Wait, so was that also a thing here? Or... Yeah, for some reason in my head I had to play king f7. Of course I can take and then go here. But even here, apparently rook b8 and, yeah, rook b8 here. And yeah, I don't know how easy this is to see off a few seconds on the clock. And okay, once we trade too many pawns, it gets like a bit difficult. Still rook d4 though, perhaps. And if rook g2, now rook d3. Oh, okay, so now the point is they don't have knight to e5 anymore. Okay, and yeah, once this kind of happens and the pawns get traded, yeah, it's impossible to win. But this is winning apparently. Oh, okay, yeah, I'm a bit stupid. So like if we just find, like, well, granted, I played this for like 1 second on the clock. It was just like a hand move, but not really using the brain, I guess. But like, okay, the engine just wants to sit here. And the point is they're kind of going to be in Zugzwang eventually, I think, because the knight can't move because it's always going to be mate. If they step the king in here, there's rook d5, they move the rook. I don't know what there is, but there's probably something. So yeah, a rather bumpy game. I think from the opening we were doing fine. A bit later on it appears we might have had to be a bit more careful. E5 is the engine move, which is interesting. And I guess the idea is to like sacrifice the pawn for some activity. Rook to E8, or maybe we're just winning it back with like sort of tactics, I guess. But anyways, interesting game and a good sort of illustration of sort of how to play sort of these Caro-kann middle games in the classical variation, or maybe later on sort of what not to do, and also some dangers that you might run into. Alright guys, we have another Caro-kann game against Mozart, who apparently joined in Lichess 2 weeks ago. But yeah, they're playing a rather strange opening here, so already this signals to me a lack of positional understanding. The fact that they're combining knight c3 in the exchange variation. Fundamentally speaking, this is just not really correct from a positional point of view, so I'm just going to keep developing knight c6, and if yeah, knight f3, bishop g4, the natural developing just move really. And yeah, if they go h3, I think we take. So okay, e6. The one thing we need to be careful of sometimes is like h3 and g4, knight e5, bishop b5. Not really now, because we've already like they've already moved the bishop, so we could probably go for takes. Sorry, just bishop h5 in this position I think is relatively safe. But takes is also fine. But sometimes it does help them fix their knight position, going to e2, c3. And I don't really want to help them fix that. So I'm just going to keep developing like this. And yeah, there's always a bit of a question to ask in these sorts of positions. Does the knight go to f6 or does it go to e7, right? And okay, knight b5. So they attack our bishop, and now we have a bit of a question. So I think b8's the right square to go to. It just feels intuitively correct, keeping the bishop on this diagonal. We don't really want to give up the bishop pair for no reason. I am thinking whether they're trying to go for c4, which I'm not scared of, but that might be their idea. In that case, we can either take or we can go knight e7 or knight f6 and just keep developing. But perhaps their idea is they want to go for pawn to c3 and sort of fix their... Okay, they go for it and fix their sort of kind of messed up knight on the square that was kind of blocking everything up. In which case, I don't know why you're going knight c3, e takes d5 anyway, but if you're like aware enough to do this sort of thing, but okay, it happens. Maybe they're going to go for a4 to try to make sure that at least when a6 happens, if it does happen, that like the knight is sort of behind the pawn rather than sort of blocking it. Very typical in these sorts of positions that white wants to sort of push forward their queenside pawns. And again, this is sort of where we are at this roadblocks, right, of like which plan do we really pursue. And there's quite a few. So given the fact that their knight is on b5, I am thinking of maybe going for like knight f6, knight e4, f5, not immediately probably, like knight f6 castles, then we'd probably go knight e4, f5, and then we go for this Pillsbury attack sort of setup. It makes a lot of sense given the fact that then they don't even have a knight really guarding this sort of square. Minority attack I'm not as convinced by here, because they can easily go a4 in the next move, knight f3, and they sort of hold together the queenside very well, I think. But aside from the Pillsbury, the other sort of thing we can go for is just knight e7 and sort of this Botvinnik plan of f6 e5. And I kind of like the look of that, so I'm going to go for this. But this other one, the Pillsbury, makes a lot of sense as well. To me, those feel like the two most critical ways to play this position. At least in this, given minority attack is always a decent way to play, but given the choice here and the fact that they've wasted quite a few tempo, the Botvinnik plan is always, like, I'd say one of the most ambitious ways to play. And given that they've wasted all these tempi, it feels like objectively this is probably correct to play like in this sort of fashion where we just try to really exploit to the maximum their sort of inaccurate play. But okay, g3 makes no sense to me, really. Well, okay, maybe in some cases there are these ideas of like, you know, they like bring the knight around and they go bishop f4 and they try to trade this stuff off, but what is this? This looks like garbage. So let's go f6. I mean, like, those are legal moves, but they don't really contribute much to the health of white's position. In fact, they just weaken things, I think. So this kind of, I don't think this sort of play belongs on the chessboard, to be honest. Okay, anyways, I'm probably being a bit too harsh, but like, you know, what is the idea of these moves, right? Like, you know, when you play chess, you should have some sort of plan. You shouldn't just be making moves and like expecting stuff to work out. Like, this is not gonna really amount to much, I think. So one thing is, I'll say, is that sometimes you have to be aware when you go e5 takes, there's always some tactical ideas in the air, especially if these bishops in contact with each other. One thing you want to watch out for is knight to g5 here, and let's say take, and then like them following up very quickly with knight e6 and counterplay on the light squares. You have to be careful with this sort of thing. I'm going to play a6 first. I'm going to insert this. I feel like kicking the knight back to a3 is just going to help. And now I'm really wanting to go e5. If this knight g5 stuff's a concern, then okay, I'm going to go h6 first and then I'll go e5. And this is no longer an option for them. But e5 takes, even if sometimes you do get this, oftentimes we can just ignore it. Let's say I go queen d6 there, which is allowed by the fact that I played a6, then we can play h6 next, kick the knight away, e4, continue our aggression, and we have quite a nice position. So I see no reason to play e5. So sorry, to refrain from e5. You always need to consider knight g5, but like after the exchange, of course, but here I don't see that as a particular issue. So I'm just going to go for e5. I don't know if he has some like perverted tactics with knight takes e5 there and like takes knight takes e6 intermediate move, but instead he goes knight c2, which is automatically just worse after e4. And the idea is, okay, the knight goes backwards, we take, we go f5, knight g3, f4, and we're positionally much better. Very standard plan. And again, our opponent, like, no offense to the guy, but he's not using his brain clearly to think. He's just sort of playing moves, and he's just ending up in like a much worse position. I mean, like, from the very start, knight c3, taking on d5, these moves do not belong together. You waste a bunch of time, and then you're playing moves like g3, king g2, and like you have all the time in the world. And this is why I like this plan, right? It's very direct, it's very aggressive, and it's especially going to work well against someone like this who is just playing like they have all the time in the world, right? Like they really don't. But after knight g1, so do we take there or do we go knight g6? Sorry, bishop g6 rather. Okay, well, bishop g6 probably not as much of a consideration in this position. And I think as well, this is just losing, right? So takes, and then g5, I think their knight's trapped. Okay, so let's go for that. I don't think there's much thinking that needs to be done. There is perhaps the point that, okay, maybe they get queen g4 there, but I don't think that's really a serious try because we get queen c8 then, we break the pin. So g5, queen g4, queen c8. If they exchange, then the knight still has nowhere to go. It's better than something like king h8, I think, because at least here they get knight to f5. And then actually they're starting to get counterplay in the knight square. So we need to be slightly careful. We can't get too cocky. f5 is always just better, but okay, like if we can trap the knight and win, but we should probably do that. So g5, queen g4, and then queen c8. I just noticed as well, we can maybe even go h5 there, takes and win a piece. But to me, it feels a bit cleaner, let's say, instead of giving up a bunch of pawns in the process, to just play queen c8, break this sort of pin. There's nothing they can do to get the knight out in the meantime, at least not that I can see. And given those circumstances, we're going to be winning a piece in a very clean way. So I think g5 is the way to go. There's no like knight f3 or they move the knight out of somewhere and then like this is pinned because, well, for one, this is defended enough, and two, that's a check, so that doesn't work. So g5 looks like it's quite winning to me, and resignation would not be a ridiculous move here. So queen c8, as I mentioned, and this just doesn't work for them, right? So yeah, Mozart, you might be good at making music, but your understanding of the Caro-kann needs some work, my mate. Okay, so yeah, he gets out of the pin, but now we just take, right? Like that's not something you really need to think about. And then like, okay, how do we continue from here? There's a few different things we can do. We can just start pushing the f-pawn. I'm sure that's good. Knight g6 also makes some sense. Queen f5, maybe flirting with the idea of some of these checks is also quite reasonable. And yeah, f5 feels like it should be quite clean. Like I'm sure everything works here. I just sort of want to make sure I'm not allowing unnecessary counterplay really. Okay, I'm just going to go knight g6, force the queen here. And in that position, we should have numerous options. We can also bring this other knight around as well as interesting. And we could even, oh, somehow I missed that. It's not a big deal. I mean, the position is still winning, but for some reason didn't consider that. Of course, now they're threatening to take this pawn with check. I think f5 is a very logical move. Just marching forward. And okay, they can attack us, and that looks cute, but I think we can just bring the rook to f7, and like they can pretend like their pieces are doing something, but we both know that they're not. So do we go knight e7 and be extra safe, or we just go queen e6? Let's just go knight to e7, just for the sake of being solid. And now we can consider f4 next even, perhaps. And again, this is just a very much winning position. H4, sure, I guess that's again a legal possibility, but is that gonna instill any kind of fear into us? Probably not. So let's go queen to e6, and yeah, at the very least we can just move the bishop out of the way, king h8, rook g8 next, and this is absolutely fine for us. Therefore, I'm slightly delaying just in case this g file backfires on us being open, so I just want to make sure I have all the pieces in first. That may change according to certain changes in the position, but like this, for example, like now we can at the very least just go take, take, and take. F4 also looks quite appealing, I must say, though, so which one do we go for? Okay, let's just take this one, and then take here. Either are completely winning, but just probably going for this one, and okay, he finally resigns. Yeah. We'll bring up a computer analysis, but yeah, really, I don't think there's going to be that much to add on top of the things I was saying during the game. It really just looked horrible, almost like every other move that our opponent made, to be honest. And again, I'm not here to like try and insult anyone, but we made one inaccuracy. Okay, it is e5. Oh, it's probably this, isn't it? Yes, it is. I like how I knew immediately. So yeah, instead of okay. I was literally telling you guys, we have to be careful of these sort of like knight moves and stuff, but I only looked at this and then takes and that, and even that's actually something we need to be careful of. So apparently he wants to take and then take, so maybe we should have been a little bit more careful in this position instead of insulting our opponent so ferociously. But h6 here is a move. Bishop f7 is also an idea sometimes, again, to sort of avoid this confrontation diagonal. If you do this, though, I imagine you probably want to not go e5 here, because takes, knight g5 feels a bit annoying. There's still an advantage, apparently. I don't ask why I'm pointing with my cup, but like here, for example, h6 makes a lot of sense, and then something like this is, again, a big advantage. But okay, they in like a few seconds played this, just not paying any attention to detail, and then this is just like a significantly better position, both strategically and tactically, because g5 now just traps a piece, queen c8, a nice detail. And this is also what I'd call like an example of resistance in calculation, where sometimes, you know, you see a move like this, you see a response, and you're like, oh, that doesn't work because they have this move. And this is a very important thing that everyone's like, to some extent, no matter how strong you are. Well, I'm not sure about Magnus Carlsen, I'm sure even he has this problem as well sometimes, where you hit a certain roadblock in your calculation, what we'd call resistance, and this can be the thing that sometimes makes or breaks like the result of a game, whether you win or not. Whether you like reach a critical moment in your calculation and you're like, oh no, like I can't calculate that's not working. Or whether you're like, okay, I'm stuck here a little bit, but I'm gonna look a little bit further, and I'm not just gonna go by my initial instinct and think that like maybe like here, like okay, well, I have to get out of the way, and then like knight f5, and okay, even here we're still better concretely, because takes, knight e7 apparently, and like even it wants to sack the pawn, which I quite like the look of. F4, okay, very inspired chess. And of course, if they take, then we just get rook g8 at the end of this and we win the queen. For me personally, this was not a moment where I felt much resistance, but I can definitely see this has been something that a lot of people just like, they might see and they're like, ooh, you know, g5, it's very committable, and it is. So if they can save the knight like this, I don't really want to make this sort of weakening move, but okay, I found this quite quickly. This was quite intuitive. To some other people, it might take a bit more time, but regardless, it's important, just small lesson calculation here, to recognize these small moments when you're calculating, you give up too early. Like sometimes that gut instinct of like, this isn't it, will be correct, but sometimes you also need to push forward a little bit more. But that being said, not much else to say about the game. It was, yeah, like again, this whole like knight c3 thing and combine it with the exchange, not great. And again, because they played so slowly, I felt this idea made a lot of sense and like going for the Botvinnik plan. But I also just want to show briefly. So let's say, I don't know, like they play in this fashion. I think this also makes a lot of sense, knight e4, and like this sort of what we'd call the Pillsbury attack sort of setup. And yeah, definitely feels like black has a pretty good position. Definitely some better moves I could have shown for white, but I mean, our opponent also could have played some better moves in the game, yet they did not. And well, such is life. Anyways, that is it for this game.